Prelitha's primary monitoring array shattered at exactly 0300 hours. Not from a weapon discharge, from sound. The human researcher lay completely unconscious, yet she was generating an involuntary vocalization registering 65 decibels at irregular per-second intervals. Prelith felt his own crystalline chest plate fracture along 3 fault lines. He immediately pinged Director Quosel. She appears to be dying. Repeatedly. Every 4 seconds. If you think you know how fragile the human body is, you are entirely mistaken. The truth found in the orbital logs is far more terrifying. 3 hours earlier, Dr. Nadia Okonkwo had cheerfully fluffed her synthetic pillows on the medical cot. "You just want to watch me sleep? That's it?" she had asked, sounding entirely amused by the setup. Now, it was hour 3 of the observational survey. The monitoring team was actively sweeping up the dust of their 4th shattered sensor array. Prelith gripped the edge of the main console. His internal luminosity flickered in a steady, dimming rhythm of distress. Down on the containment cot, Dr. Okonkwo had fully disconnected from her own voluntary motor control. She was a prisoner in her own biology. Prelith ran the biometric sweep again. The readouts flashed a sickly yellow across the observation glass. Her heart rate had plummeted 22%. Her core temperature had dropped by more than a full degree. To any Mavari, a thermal loss of that magnitude signaled the immediate cessation of life. Yet, her brain activity was spiking in jagged, violent crests that perfectly mimicked a controlled neurological seizure. And then there was the noise. The database eventually categorized the guttural, rhythmic vibration as snoring. It was a localized acoustic anomaly that resonated precisely at the frequency required to destabilize Mavari crystalline structures. Auditor Bren stood at the far end of the deck, his hands pressed hard against his own chest. He had already filed a Level 4 biological hazard report just to authorize the deployment of emergency structural dampeners. The clock hit hour 4. The situation deteriorated. Beneath the human's closed, paralyzed eyelids, her ocular organs began to twitch. Rapid, erratic movements. Left, right, down. Prelith leaned closer to the primary glass. His audio receptors dialed back to survive the acoustic assault. Her cerebral cortex was fully illuminated on the thermal scans. It was burning brighter and hotter than it had when she was awake and answering intake questions. A 22% drop in core function. Voluntarily. In the dark. She was unconscious, yet her neurological pathways were generating complex, fully immersive visual and emotional simulations. Tavri, the young apprentice, stepped up to the secondary console. Her crystalline facets were dim with localized terror. "Is she?" Tavri pointed a trembling digit at the fluctuating neuroband. "Is she processing combat scenarios in her sleep?" Prelith cross-referenced the human adrenaline spikes with the visual cortex firing patterns. The confirmation lit up green. Yes. The paralyzed human was actively simulating threat responses, mapping emotional distress, and consolidating survival memories simultaneously, which meant catastrophic nerve failure. Or so the orbital manuals claimed. Prelitha's digits flew across the tactile interface. Humans called this phase REM. A state where the mind severed its connection to the physical form just to hallucinate vividly without tearing its own muscles apart. He checked the distress databases again. 12,000 species listed on the Galactic Health Board. Not one of them required biological paralysis to function. The Mavari sleep equivalent lasted exactly 22 minutes of conscious rest cycling. Full awareness was maintained. Zero loss of motor control. The full survey results compiled at hour 7. The data was far worse than the live feed. Prelith uncovered a human malfunction called sleep paralysis. Consciousness returns, but motor control does not, leaving the human awake, immobile, and frequently hallucinating predatory figures in their own sleep chambers. 8% of their population experienced this regularly. They even had a cultural designation for the hallucination. They called it the shadow figure, and they still voluntarily returned to this vulnerable state the next night. He also discovered sleepwalking, a terrifying physical desync where humans navigated their environments and operated heavy machinery while completely unconscious. One Earth case study documented a human driving an automobile 14 kilometers without waking up. The health board chamber fell completely silent. Director Quosel's crystalline form dimmed to its lowest functional luminosity. Beside Prelith, Tavri was already furiously drafting new health code entries. At hour 8, Dr. Okonkwo woke up. She sat up and stretched, executing a massive jaw extension display that caused 2 senior auditors to physically recoil. She tapped the face of the worn leather watch on her wrist. The rhythmic, mechanical ticking was completely absent, the hands frozen in place. 3:47, she mumbled. Same time it stopped when my dad gave it to me for night shifts. Prelith approached the observation glass, his internal structure vibrating with residual panic. Dr. Okonkwo, are you aware that your species enters a state clinically indistinguishable from reversible death for 1/3 of your existence? Nadia smiled. Yeah, we call it the best part of the day, which meant the board had no choice. Within an hour, the Galactic Health Board suspended all interspecies cohabitation certifications pending a 4-month review. 7 distinct sleep-adjacent safety codes were aggressively rewritten. The Human Dormancy Protocol was added as a Category 1 biohazard across 300 orbital stations. The word nap was officially classified as restricted terminology. Prelith submitted the final report by the end of his shift. Human sleep consisted of 4 to 5 cycles per night, lasting 90 minutes each. Their brains violently consumed 20% of the body's oxygen while resting. The sleep deprivation lethality threshold was a mere 11 days. They generated 4 to 7 complete narrative simulations every night, with 14 million sleepwalking incidents recorded annually and 67% of the population vocalizing while unconscious. It was an utterly incomprehensible evolutionary strategy that forced a nascent, highly vulnerable species to shut down entirely in a hostile environment surrounded by active nocturnal predators, paralyzing their physical forms repeatedly just to prevent their volatile neurochemistry from tearing their bodies apart. They practiced death daily. Prelith's final line on the report summarized the terror perfectly. The species that conquered its Deathworld did so while spending 1/3 of every rotation practicing death. 6 months later, Prelith passed the health board lobby. Dr. Okonkwo's leather watch sat inside a reinforced glass case. The hands remained permanently frozen at 3:47 a.m. A glowing warning plaque beneath it read, "Human circadian artifact, do not synchronize." Beside the display hung an informational poster designed by Tavri. It featured a diagram of human sleep stages translated into 14 languages. At the bottom, Tavri's careful handwriting offered a quiet observation. They close their eyes in a world that hunts them, and every morning they open them is a choice. Behind the desk, Tavri's crystalline structure glowed bright and steady. She was already drafting Chapter 2, Human Yawning, Contagious Neurological Event.